Almost 16 years ago, I painted my first Warhammer 40,000 Tyranid, and now I have over 25,000 points. But we're going to just throw those away and start a new hive fleet. I'm Matthew from MiniWarGaming.com, and I am obsessed with the Tyranids from Warhammer 40k. Now, before I go any further, don't worry, I'm not actually going to throw away my collection. We're just going to put it neatly in some boxes and put it on the shelf to come out on occasion for maybe some narrative stuff. Because it's time for a new hive fleet to arrive, and this is my West Coast hive fleet from the Segmentum Pacificus. Let's back up a second. For those of you who have no idea what Warhammer 40k is, or maybe have just heard about it a little, let me explain a little bit behind its story. You see, Warhammer 40k is set 40,000 years in the future, and it is not a nice future. It is grimdark. Humanity is constantly at war, both from without, from aliens such as the Eldar and the Orcs and the Tau, and yes, the Tyranids, and from within, which is a very grave threat of chaos rising up and taking over the galaxy. But none is quite so much a threat as the intergalactic Tyranids, who are here to consume all and add your biomass to their hive fleets. You see, while humanity was developing warp travel, the ability to travel faster than light through the immaterium, another dimension layered on top of our dimension where chaos is prevalent, the Tyranids were already traveling from another galaxy, looking for more food to consume to add to their biomass. And yes, humanity might be a formidable opponent, especially with having developed the Space Marines, genetically modified humans who are capable of taking on grave threats, as well as the billions, if not trillions, who serve in the Astra Militarum, grinding away to push back all of the threats that befall the Imperium. They have never faced anything quite like the Tyranids. Not much is known about the Tyranid threat and where they came from. Rumors, of course, abound that they have already consumed dozens of galaxies before our own. And most of the Tyranids so far have been seen on the eastern side of the galaxy. Many different hive fleets, many different splinter fleets, and many different tendrils attacking from the eastern fringe and also attacking just straight up into so many different systems. So far, humanity has been able to hold them back, although at great cost. But now there is a new threat as the Tyranids arrive from the Segmentum Pacificus, otherwise known as the west side of the galaxy. Humanity there was unprepared and is already being destroyed. Hundreds, thousands of worlds falling to the Tyranids. The Tyranids are almost unimaginably alien. Their individuals don't exist. Instead, everything forms one large hive, almost like a hive of ants or bees, except with much greater intelligence. The hive mind, which forms the intelligence and the will of the Tyranids, controls everything. But it's not a single entity as far as we know. It is a connection of all of the synaptic links that the larger organisms of the Tyranids do create, all the way from the lowly Tyranid warrior up to one of the large hive ships, form neural links in this network that allow the Tyranids to act as one as they assault planets and systems and even sectors. The Tyranids descend upon a world, first with their vanguard of spores and gene stealers and lictors hiding in the brush looking to take out key defenses and key military generals. And then the rest of the hive fleet arrives, raining down their huge spore pods filled with monstrous carnifexes and tyrannifexes, tervigons spilling forth hundreds and thousands of termagants, hormigants swarming through the fields to assault wherever there is resistance, and large, enormous Hierophant Biotitans shooting their enormous bioweapons that are easily able to punch through the mighty titans of the Imperium legions. Any world that actually resists the Tyranids and manages to hold them at bay does so at incredible cost, almost to the point of being left open and prey to other insidious forces, whether the Xenos or Chaos. Now, while technically, as far as we know, the Tyranids are one gigantic organism, each small creature like a cell in a body, they do operate in what are called hive fleets. Each hive fleet seems to act independent of other hive fleets, and each has their own adaptations on how they fight and the organisms that they grow, some specialized very much in certain things. For example, the very first hive fleet that we know of is Hive Fleet Behemoth, which came in and crashed with the mighty Ultramarines of Space Marine chapter. Eventually they were destroyed but then splintered off into many splinter fleets, which is basically if a few Tyranids get away, well, eventually they'll create an entirely new fleet as they digest new biomass and create new ships and new creatures. But I would say probably the biggest and most well-known hive fleet is Hive Fleet Leviathan, which is attacked not only on the eastern fringe, but now is being found in the Segmentum Pacificus. With the launch of Warhammer 40k 10th edition this summer, I thought this was the ideal time to actually create a new hive fleet. I might wonder why I would do that. I spent the past 16 years amassing 25,000 points. For those of you not familiar, the average game is anywhere from 1,500 points to maybe 2,000 points. So 25,000 points is a rather large force. I've even painted a lot of these models myself back in the early days, my very first Hive Tyrant and Carnifexes and Gene Stealers. Paint job's not the best, but I am proud to have done it myself. But there's been something inside of me that's been saying, you know, Hive Fleet Charon, which is what my Hive Fleet is, which is a splinter fleet of Hive Fleet Kraken, for those of you who know the different Hive Fleets. It's been fun building all the narrative around it in the Eastern Fringe as it's attacked Tau, and it's attacked the Imperium, and it's even attacked Chaos and Orcs. It's had its fill of all of that. But with the new lore of Hive Fleet Leviathan attacking from Segmentum Pacificus, I thought that is a good excuse to create a new Hive Fleet with a new color scheme. Because I love my red and yellow or brown or whatever it happens to have been painted by the specific painter who did it. I love that color scheme, it's great. But I want more. And I want an excuse to collect even more models. And let's just face it, Hive Fleet Charon is pretty much complete. It has everything I need except for the new models that came out with 10th edition. Now the lore of my new Hive Fleet Nihilus, I am not going to reveal completely right now, except that they've appeared in the Segmentum Pacificus or the West Coast as well. The reason I'm not going to tell you all the lore, even though I really want to, is because I plan on doing a narrative campaign that will introduce what they're all about, because they are going to be different than a lot of the other Hive Fleets. All right, I'm super excited here because I got Paul, who totally consented to be on camera. And he's brought in my first batch of painted Tyranids. Let's take a look. Oh, all the little bugs.
And these are the big bugs.
And the big bugs. Ugh. I worked really hard to come up with the color scheme, but I have to say Paul worked even harder to come up with the exact formula for everything. And so while I came up with the general colors of the green and the orange and the basic idea behind what I wanted, Paul was tasked with coming up with the exact paints being used, because I knew that over time I'm going to build another 20 to 25,000 points, and it's not going to be just one painter doing it. And one of the things I kind of regret with my first Hive Fleet is that I didn't have a coordinated color scheme, and so each painter did it slightly different, and that's okay. It kind of makes for an interesting look at a distance to have this slight variation in the carapace color and in the skin color and everything else like that. But I wanted this one to be even more honed, especially the bases. I feel like the bases being the same is probably the best thing that you can do to make your entire army coherent. Even if everything is painted separately and everything is painted differently, if you have the bases match, then it looks like it belongs to the same force. And after a few weeks of work, Paul has perfected this color scheme, and I absolutely love it. He managed to paint up a couple beautiful neuro tyrants. We've got, of course, the mighty screamer killers. We've got a couple psychophages, and no Tyranid swarm would be complete without the swarms themselves of the termagants and the neurogaunts, and even some barbgaunts as well. But lurking in the shadows, we of course have our leapers and our Shrike primes with their wings ready to descend from the sky. I can't wait for everything that's about to come. I have a lot of other Tyranids being painted right now by a couple other painters as well, which should help to bring me to my first 5,000 points. But I'll be showing that in another video. Speaking of which, this is the first video in a series that I'm going to be creating on the creation of a new Hive Fleet. In this series, I'm going to be going over how they're painted, how I came about creating the concept behind them. I'm also going to be making battle reports with them, obviously, and even more importantly, some narrative campaigns that feature them as the antagonist that'll reveal exactly what they are all about. And eventually, a huge 40k narrative campaign involving them as a key player that even you can come in and participate in, much like our current Age of Sigmar campaign, The Lost City, that is currently running and still is open for more guests to come in. But more on that later. So embark on this gigantic quest with me to build up an army worthy of the hive mind, and to do it quicker than 16 years like the other one that I did. But that's just like the Tyranids. It's exponential growth. They start small, they grow, and then they grow so quickly that there's nothing you can do to hold back the forces of these Xenos that will consume everything in the galaxy. If you want to make sure not to miss an episode of this, make sure you subscribe and like this video. But I'd also love to hear from you in the comments below of what you'd like to see in this series. If you have a suggestion for a specific video, I haven't made them all yet, so I am totally open to any of your ideas. Go ahead, leave that in the comments below. And I will see you in the next video. Happy wargaming.